Hello and welcome to Jazz Across the Pond. Jazz interviews reimagined. A brand new and a very exciting bringing together of two great nations. It's jazz talking like you've never seen or heard it before. Now let's meet my partner in crime. A warm welcome to Jazz Across the Pond from me, Roger Lee, aka the Jazz Cat.
And I'm Kevin Goolsby, and they call me Mr. G.
Mr. G, the hanging to my Daz.
Oh, wow. The Hagen to your Das. Well, I guess that's definitely a more appealing phrase than being the ice to your cream.
Ooh, I like that. I decided to go for that one tonight because I felt the last few weeks, the interviews have been quite hot. I think we needed a bit of ice cream to cool us down a bit.
They have. They've been marvelous. As a matter of fact, last week's was another awesome interview.
What do you think?
Well, I tell you what, obviously it was Greg Karukas. His latest, and we featured his latest project called Serenata. Mm-hmm. And it's surprisingly, in all these years, it is his very first piano solo project. Yeah. And of course, it had several original compositions, but the true focus of that project are those arrangements that he wrote. I mean, they're beautifully executed. It was a pure simplicity that elegantly captures the essence of some of Brazil's greatest composers and performers. It's truly an amazing project, and it is very moving as well.
It was a stunning, and what a lovely gentleman. I mean, to learn from his starts with Russ Freeman and Moonlighting, the Rippingtons, of course, then right the way through, and his amazing catalogue of solo work. I know both you and myself have both been big fans of his. And I've got a section on the wall back and dedicated to him. I mean, just an amazing musician, and to have him sat there and I love the story about the finding of the old box with the cassette tapes in there, with people in the audience listening to him, with the likes of Dave Grusin and Quincy Jones and Wayne Shorter, and he went, dusted the corner of them and literally played them, and that inspired him with his new album. I mean, incredible story. And we always say this, but if you've missed last week's interview, that and previous weeks are all there on YouTube. They are all there for an archive of them, and there's some fabulous interviews. I know we're biased, but they are really great interviews, and we're very, very pleased and honored to have such great artists join us.
Absolutely. With Greg, it's like I said, he's done so many projects, but his first actual piano solo project, and then, coming out of COVID, and then before that, tragically, the loss of his wife. Yeah. And he has a final tribute as the very last track on that album to Yvonne. So if you haven't seen that interview, people, shame on you. It's a good one.
Absolutely. Anyway, let's run it forward to tonight. We are dressed very tropical with our shirts, and I wish we discussed this beforehand, but I like you.
Well.
Anyway, tonight, we have got another great interview. We've got a gentleman, he's actually sat in the waiting room waiting for us all the way from Atlanta, Georgia. And he's got a fabulous new album. And before we invite him into from the green room to come and join us here into our interview, a great one. It's Mr. D. Lucas, and the album is called The Time Is Now. And I think The Time Is Now, if we give it 3.5 minutes to play the track, which is his new single from it, is called Full Tilt. It was produced by Adam Hawley. We're big fans of Adam Hawley. And
absolutely
great guitarist, Blake Aaron. It's a fabulous track. I know we're just going to sit back and enjoy this. So I know that says the time is now, but the time is roughly about 3.5 minutes time. You're listening to Jazz Across the Pond. Wait for us now here. Great. And we're going to invite Mr. D. Lucas to join us.
Hi, this is smooth jazz saxophonist D. Lucas from Atlanta, Georgia, and you're watching me on Jazz Across the Pond with the Jazz Cat and Mr. G. I hope you enjoy.
So how about that for a track? What an amazing track from an incredible album. It's a debut album. The album is called This Time Is Now. The particular track that we just played is the brand new single, Full Tilt, produced by Adam Hawley and features the wonderful guitarist Blake Aaron. Ladies and gentlemen, Jazz Across the Pond, we are very, very pleased and proud to welcome the man himself, all the way from Atlanta, Georgia. Ladies and gentlemen, it's D. Lucas.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey.
The crowd goes wild.
Oh,
all two of us.
All three.
That's COVID for you, brother. That's
Later
COVID
on.
for you.
Thank you so much for joining us.
my pleasure. Good to be here.
Okay, so we've just played your track and that. Tonight's very special guest features artist is from Jazz Across the Pond. It's the wonderful D. Lucas. What can we say about this week's very special guest? A national recording artist, a saxophonist, D. Lucas is steadily growing his brand and his fan base, beginning with his first debut album, Remembrance, in 2004. Thereafter, it's been a steady showcase of unique styling with 9 great albums, including his new stunning album, This Time Is Now, which we're going to hear a couple more tracks on during the interview. And I personally, I know with Kevin as well, I think it marks your best work to date. So D. Lucas, smooth jazz saxophonist from Atlanta, born in Tanner, in Alabama, United States. D, could you tell our viewers, our listeners, more about your childhood, your introduction to music, and did you come from a musical family?
Well, yes and no. And when I say musical, my mom, she was in the choir, so she sung in the choir. But in terms of musicality, instruments, I'm the first one. So, and growing up, I should say, I did not start musically. And as a child, I was heavily into athletics. I played baseball, football, basketball. But it wasn't until I graduated from college and moved to Atlanta, picked up my first saxophone and started learning the sax. But I grew up learning music. I mean, I've always been around music, so it was a part of the household. I mean, it was one of those things where your parents made you put the record on and listen to different styles of music. So that was really my introduction to learning a lot of different styles, not only just learning, but appreciating a lot of different stuff. Because I would say growing up, radio formats were set up where they played different genres. Right. They played R&B, soul, blues, pop. So you had a wide array of genres that you listened to. So your taste buds that much more greater. So that kind of lends into what I do now in terms of, even though it's contemporary jazz, there's a lot of elements, a lot of different styles there.
Absolutely. And I think we're seeing that with a lot of jazz artists. You know, that's what makes jazz so beautiful. It's a growing genre, and you take elements and influences from your past, blend it in with your style for jazz, and it just creates a great sound. But I'm amazed that you didn't start playing till you got out of college, because by 2007, I mean, you captured the #2 spot at the Capitol Jazz Festival's jazz competition, and soon thereafter, I mean, you're like an opening act for, you know, Boney James and Norman Brown, Ronnie Laws, Greg Karukas, Peter White, Nick Coleone, Peebo Bryson, the Manhattans, and Michael Franks. I mean, that's pretty amazing that you got to that point that quickly. But if you would, share with our viewers what it was like to open shows for great artists like these, and how did it inspire and motivate you moving forward?
Well, it was definitely a learning curve. At the same time, a great appreciation to be on the same stage or the same bill with guys that you actually bought records from. Before I even started learning to play the sax, I mean, I was buying those guys' records and stuff. So I was always been a fan. And to share or even greet Ronnie Laws, I mean, that's like the pinnacle. Like,
yeah, absolutely,
so to speak. But here's the thing, though, is my attitude was constantly grow. constantly learning. Because whether I did not start in music, I've always had some type of platform in front of people. By going to college, you have the exposure to public appearance.
Right.
So when the time come to, I guess, becoming a musician on stage, it kind of marries the two, but it's a little different, of course. But in terms of maturity, I think that's the better term. And I think that's one of the assets or benefits that I started late in life as a musician, because there was a sense of maturity there. So stage fright kind of goes out of the window because you've had some other things of life experiences that kind of benefits that.
Right.
So when you meet a Boney James, he's great, but he's a musician just like you are. So you kind of, the respect factor is there.
As it should be.
Very should be. Now, I've got a couple of questions. I'm going to pick up because we didn't know that about this sport aspect. So you got the baseball bat, you got the American hat on, you got the rest of it, and you started to put that all to one side. So why the saxophone? What was your interest? Why the saxophone as opposed to bass guitar or drums or whatever?
Good question. And it's funny you said bass guitar, because as a kid, that was my first love. Even
Wow.
I didn't learn it. That was my first love, was bass guitar. Why? Because I was turned out by Bootsy Collins.
All right.
Man, when I say I'm a funketeer, I mean,
Yes.
that was like one of my first albums I bought was Parliament Funkadelic, Bootsy Rubber Band. So I was a funketeer. So the fact that he had this space bass, this star-shaped guitar, I was kind of curious. I was intrigued by, wow, he's able to play almost like a Jimi Hendrix style sound, but on bass. But I mean, I like that. But then what led me to saxophone was actually my days in college. I joined a fraternity, and a lot of my fraternity brothers were into jazz music. And one in particular was more into the contemporary jazz sound. And I think what really grabbed me more so, and I had heard some contemporary jazz music before going on campus, is the fact that I was hearing it all the time.
Right.
And what really grabbed me was the fact that some of the artists like Grover Washington, Ronnie Long, George Howard, they were taking R&B sounds. They were taking songs that you actually heard on the radio, and they were jazzing them. They were fusing them. And I thought, and I think George, more important, George Howard, he had soprano sax, and he had an amazing sound. And I'm just into uniqueness. I like uniqueness. If someone brings some uniqueness to the table, you got me. And I think that's what really gravitated me to the saxophone, was the actual sound. It was almost like the closest thing to the human voice.
Right.
So,
and there's so many outstanding saxophone players that preceded you. It's difficult to find that unique sound. I mean, Art Porter was somebody that, again, had a very unique sound, and we lost him early. Who knows where he would have taken the genre? But that's pretty fascinating. That bass guitar, huh?
Bass.
Somebody giving Julian Vaughn a run for his money, right?
No. I tell you, I love what Julian Vaughn does, man. He's amazing. And I mean, not only just his bass guitar, his bass playing, but his production, his overall package just tops. I love it.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going to talk, Roger's going to talk a little bit about your production aspect as well. So he's not the only one.
In 1997, you got your start as a musical playing as a sideman for a local band that were called Between 9 and 7. The band recorded a CD, and it had meteoric sort of a regional hit. And although you got used to performance, and you got both rhythm and solos, and you felt it was time to develop your own ensemble and demand for, you wanted to be more challenged in what you were doing within yourself as a musician, as an entrepreneur. Now, we would love you to elaborate for our viewers exactly what followed you to make this incredible brave move from leaving the band and going solo.
Well, yeah, it was a twofold thing. Basically, I always wanted to be a business owner. I wanted to business, and actually, believe it or not, when you own your own band or you become a recording artist, it's a business. It's a business. So therefore, you kind of have ownership in what you're doing, and that's you own your music, you manage your music, and you manage your career. But the reason why the other reason why I wanted to go into a solo artist is to basically challenge myself in terms of the creative side, the writing, the production. Even if you can't have sole control of it, you can put people around you to help you grow and cultivate your music, because that's the end result. It's the music. Basically, that's how I decided to move forward as a solo artist, because I knew there was something on the horizon as an artist. And actually, truth be told, that's where it was heading anyway with the industry. More artists were becoming more solo artists. The band concept was kind of fading away, if it had not already at that time. There were more bands, 70s. 80s is when it started to make a change because of the electronic drums, the electronic machine, and cost factors there. And that's when the solo artist phenom took off. And actually, when I joined the band, it was one of the few bands that really was in existence at the time. Locally, there was a lot of bands, but they were makeshift bands.
Right.
But actually, in reality, from the bigger perspective, industry-wise, solo artist was pretty much the way to go.
Excellent.
Well, you made.
Sorry, Kevin.
Sorry, Roger.
I've got a very quick question before I hand you over to Kevin, and I really want to ask you this question. Can you remember, going solo, can you remember the first time you heard one of your songs on the radio? What were you doing? Where were you?
Oh, yeah. Actually, of course, I was driving. And
of course.
I was driving. It was a long drive when I heard it. Actually, I heard it, and the first song was the tribute to George Howard, Remembrance. That was my debut album. And I actually heard it on WCLK, and they played When Summer Comes. That was an amazing feeling. And I tell you, to this very day, and that was 2004 then, even in 2021, when I hear my records now on radio, it doesn't get old. No. You learn to appreciate it. And because there's so many great artists out there, and there's a lot of artists that's not getting an opportunity to get their music heard, for whatever reason. But the fact remains, to hear your music on radio is still surreal, and it's something that you don't take for granted.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, 2 years after being with Between 9 and 7, actually it was New Year's Eve of 1999, you formed your own contemporary jazz trio, Expressions. And your jazz trio collectively produced and recorded a CD called Footprints, which gained regional success. And Footprints contained, I have to say, a very nice cover of the classic Tom Bell and Linda Greed hit, People Make the World Go Round, which was originally recorded by the Stylistics back in 1972. So you get back in my high school days there. But if you would, other than yourself, did either one of your two members of your trio, did either one of them move on to either regional or national prominence like yourself?
Well, actually, the keyboardist, Kerry Davis, he actually was with the prior band Between 9 and 7 with me. And he joined the production side of my solo work with me. He also joined the Expressions band.
Right.
Other drummer, he's now deceased now, Keith Ledbetter. He did not move on as a solo artist, but he did have the honor of performing with a lot of great gospel artists like Dottie Peoples, Shirley Caesar. But those guys were very talented. They can hold their own. And all this time, I've always encouraged Kerry on keys to he should pursue a solo artist, career as well, because he was just that talented on keys.
Incredible. Well, I'll tell you what we're going to do now, because we're just going to break for the interview now to play another track from your wonderful album, This Time Is Now. We've already heard your new single that's been released now, the Full Tilt. We're going to play another track for it, then we're going to come back to this amazing interview. I know Kevin and myself have got a load more questions we're going to ask you. In America, we know that you're very, very big. In England, there are a few little pockets around England that may be watching you going, we want to hear more of this. Okay, it sounds like an interesting life story, but let's hear another track from this album. So we'll pick out a track. We're going to play Feeling You, featuring the wonderful Daryl Williams, who will be our guest with us in about 5-6 weeks' time, something like that, Kevin?
Yep.
He will be one of our guests as well. So here we are. Well, it's Jazz Across the Pond with Kevin and myself. Here's a track from the wonderful D. Lucas. This is Feeling You. We'll be back in a moment.
Welcome back to Jazz Across the Pond, Jazz Interviews Reimagined with the Jazz Cat and Mr. G. You've been listening to the fantastic new album, The Time Is Now, by our guest D. Lucas. And the track you just heard was Feeling You, featuring one of my favorite all-time bassists and a miraculous vocalist, Mr. Darrell Williams. That was a great track. Really loved that. Good stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Well, Dee, you were once quoted as saying, listening to some of the talented sax players around the city was education enough to build a thirst to go home and mimic what they did. The combination of listening to a wealth of music and going to see local cats like, Darian Emery and Antonio Allen, Sam Skelton, Jimmy Brick Brown, and trumpeters Melvin Miller and Milkshake was truly enough to develop a personal vote of confidence and a sense of hunger. So Dee, if you would, what was the motivation you gained from these artists? I mean, was it hearing and seeing the adulation that they received from their fans, or was it a sense of, I'm every bit as good as these cats, or was it something else?
Well, it was definitely not the arrogant side. I'm just as good. I think what really gave me the vote of confidence was the fact that we kind of like physically, age-wise, we were right there. Right. I mean, I could relate to those guys. They were my friends. Those guys, eventually I introduced myself, and aside from the music, I just knew those guys on a personal level. But to see them perform something that I wasn't doing, but they were doing, and the reaction that they were able to create in an atmosphere with the crowd or with the audience, and it was always something I wanted to do musically, but they were able to take what I wanted to do and show it to me. And they took something that was very complex, what I think, and they made it very simplistic, because it's not easy. It's not easy performing in front of anyone, but they made it very simplistic, and they're very talented. They were very, very talented, but I think more importantly, it was their attitude, their personality that was very inviting. They were very down to earth, very cool, and they were very encouraging. I know, well, Antonio Allen, he is the youngest. I mean, Antonio is very young. At the time when I met him, I think he was like in his early 20s at the time, and he was playing clubs, and he was so amazing. I said, man, and I asked him a lot of questions, and he was very gracious to have a good conversation with me. So, when you have people that reciprocate on your questions or your curiosity, it also, it gives you that vote of confidence that you can do it. You want to be just like.
Well, now, was this in Atlanta when you said playing around town? Yeah. I was born in Atlanta, so blow that horn a little bit,
Yeah, I mean, I met all those guys at the infamous Cafe 290.
Yeah, right. Very good.
Now, you've already now very nicely, we're just going to step nicely into the next question, because you've performed at several jazz festivals, such as the Arizona Jazz Festival, the Jacksonville Jazz Festival, the Savannah Jazz Festival, and the Atlanta Jazz Festival. So my question to yourself, Dee, is performing live or studio? Have you a preference?
They're different. I like both. I can always say that there is nothing like performing live. But at the same time, the creative process is another part that's just as challenging as well, and it's satisfying as well, because you're creating something. You're taking something now, and down the road, this is what it's going to become. And between that, from A to B, you don't know how it's going to go. So that the creative part is always challenging, but there's nothing like performing live. So often you have people come up to you after the show, and they will tell you, their testimony or something to the effect that I've had a hard week, but these 2 hours on Friday night just made it all that much better.
Oh, wow.
So that kind of speaks volumes. It tells me that you're doing something halfway decent. So, and it also encouraged me to continue to do what I'm doing, and that's sharing my gift.
Right. Well, you mentioned that it's almost equal for you as far as whether it's live or studio, but again, talking about being an entrepreneur in 2004, you launched a new business venture for you at that time. It was your first record label called Mo Better Recordings.
Mhm.
And the following year, so it took you less than a year once you got your own studio, which the following year you released and independently distributed your highly acclaimed debut solo project, Remembrance, which we already alluded to.
Mhm.
In 2007, though, you released your second project, Something to Ride To, which peaked at number 10 on Smooth Jazz Global's Top 50 Indie chart. Now, that's an amazingly fast start for a young jazz artist with a new record label. So Roger and I wanted to congratulate you, Dee, on your amazingly successful start in the business. But I have a couple of questions. The first is, but what was and you've alluded to it a little bit, what was the impetus for starting your own music label? A lot of that is having control of your own creativity and your own timeline and all those things, surrounding yourself with the studio artists that you want. Secondly, how affirming was the success of your first two projects with respect to having launched your own record label? And then quickly at the end, if you'll tell our viewers about your new record label, ODL Music.
Well, I think the importance of starting my own label was just like anyone else that's an entrepreneur, whether it's a restaurant or a private business, you want ownership and you want to reap the of what you put in. That's just my nature. I think ownership is key. It's long term. It's not something that you're gonna see right up front. You pay the price along the way, but the dividends pays off down the road. I just think in terms of the success after 2 years, I never saw it that way. I just saw it as work in progress because there were so many other things I wanted to do because I saw things that I could have done differently. There's some things I did accomplish that was on the fast track that a lot of people tell me, but when you're in the midst of it, you really don't see it as a fast track. You're just constantly working. But people on the outside, they would be the first to tell you, no, you're not supposed to be here this quick. So,
I said, hey, that's me, man.
A lot, even to this very day. And I just don't see it because you're in the midst of it working.
Oh, yeah.
You're always trying to reach for something more because it's constantly changing. It doesn't stay the same. So you want to kind of stay with the flow of change. And to where we are now in 2021, I started a new label back in 2017, ODL Music. And, the reason for the change is because over a period of time, you learn some things and you learn some things were lessons, life lessons, things that you kind of would like to do over again. So I said, well, you know what? Let me start from scratch. Let me just build from what I've done and move on because things don't always stay the same. Things do change. And I think change is good. So with the music, with the new record, why not put this record on a new label and move forward? And it wasn't a bad thing why I changed. I just felt that giving it a fresh start, giving myself a shot in the arm, so to speak, to move forward and do some other things musically and move in a different direction, a growth perspective, I should say.
Right. Yeah.
So this is the third record off this label, and it's doing really well. I'm very optimistic.
It certainly is doing very well. We'll go over that as well, but
yeah. Now, the Sweet Spot was produced by the legendary Bob Baldwin. As a result, the radio single Road Warrior made the Billboard Top 100 charts for 8 weeks. Now, Bob Baldwin was a guest here on Jazz Across the Pond around about 5-6 weeks ago. A brilliant interview, and it's all on YouTube, so people want to go and watch it and that. So my question to yourself is, what did Bob bring to the table for you? What did you learn from that amazing man?
Okay, here we go. The good question. That's a great question because it ties into my entrepreneurship. From Bob being a master on the music side, with the piano and the production, Bob was one of the few guys that I studied and watched from a business perspective. Now, we talk about the music side on how I got started, but I watched Bob from afar because he had his own label, City Sketches Inc. And at that time, you didn't see a lot of that. At least I didn't see it. And that was when Bob was here in Atlanta. I think he had just moved to Atlanta. And for me to see that and my mindset with entrepreneurship in the wings, that was very, very inspiring. So I watched how he moved. I watched how he worked his business, and I used some elements from the way he ran his business on how he wanted to control his music, his catalog, and also move forward with his business. So that's how I got started. I kind of patterned the way he did business. Now, in terms of production and how it came about, I've always wanted to perform or have a project up under him because I like his writing style. His music, great. And I've always wanted someone to challenge me, someone on that level, because he could give it to you. I mean, he's been in the game for a while. He's been around the best, and I wanted him to challenge me. And it was a challenge.
Well, I tell you what, if you were going to pick a business model to use for yourself, I mean, Bob Baldwin couldn't be a much better choice.
Absolutely.
Well, now you already said that you've had some success with the new project. Let's talk about that just for a second. So The Time Is Now marks your 9th worldwide release and 8th studio recording to date. It features some of the best jazz artists of today, including Adam Hawley, David P. Stevens, Blake Aaron, George Freeman, and Daryl Williams. And Roger, here's one of my shameless plugs that I've learned to do from you. All of them happen to be friends of Mr. G and artist members of our Facebook International Jazz page, The Smooth Jazz Train. So there's my shameless plug. But The Time Is Now has captured 4 radio singles, or produced 4 radio singles that have captured spots on the smooth jazz and R&B charts. We've talked a little bit about your Full Tilt single that was released with Blake Aaron. That has gotten immediate, reception from jazz fans around the world, and currently is holding down 4 spots on the charts. You've got the number 10 spot on Smooth Jazz Global's Top 100, the number 2 spot on Billboard's Smooth Jazz New and Active chart, number 17 on Radio Wave's Smooth Jazz Top 100, and the 21st spot on Groove Jazz Music's Top 30. I mean, that's an incredible run. So to say, yeah, we're doing all right was like, being so humble. But now that the pandemic is releasing its grip in the United States, we see more and more venues are starting to open up, and I'm thrilled that you've got an engagement at the Tin Pan here in Richmond, Virginia on August the 27th. So my question for you is, are there other dates and locations where you'll be performing that you can share with our viewing audience?
Yeah, actually, I have one coming up June 18th in Charlotte, North Carolina at the Performing Arts Center. Part of that center is called the Stage Door Theater. I will be there on June 18th, and then July 9th, I will be in Houston, Texas at Sugar's Cuisine Cajun Club. And then I go to Sacramento on July 31st at the B Street Theater. Actually, I'm going to be a special guest there. That event is actually the album release for vocalist Joe Levy. I'm very happy for him. Very talented R&B artist, very talented vocalist. And of course, in August 21st, I'll be at Fort Worth, Texas at the Warehouse with another saxophonist, Wade Campbell, and keyboardist G. Rosario. And that's cool. So he actually my MD this year, and I'm over to performing with him. And then, of course, the 27th of August at the Tin Pan, in which I hope.
Oh, I'll be there, brother. Come on. You can give me a shout out from the stage too. You can embarrass me or something.
Yeah. September 19th, studio. Let's see. I'll be in Studio City, California, at the Vitello's Supper Club with pianist Gail Johnson. For those who don't know, Gail Johnson, pianist for Jazz in Pink, and she's also for Norman Brown, and also the special guest guitarist Ray Fuller.
Get out of here!
Yeah,
Rogers interviewed Ray Fuller,
and he's a musician's musician. He used to tour with Anita Baker, George Duke, George Howard. You just name it, man. I'm looking forward to performing with those guys.
Well, we've been in contact with Ray Fuller because we've been trying to he did his debut album 10 years ago and we're waiting for a follow-up to the album. And we've been in contact with him recently. He said, listen, I'm working on my new album, but because of COVID, it's been put back and back. So please say hi from myself, Roger Lee and Mr. D. And we would love to interview him once he gets his new album out. So say hi to us.
I will reach out to him. Matter of fact, he said that record will be out by September before we played it in California. He will have the record ready to go.
Great. Well, can you put a word in and say that we would love to interview him?
Great. I will let him know.
Now, I mean, it's incredible. We could just chat and chat and chat. There is so much great music. We're going to finish the interview off with playing another track of that. But before then, D. Lucas, got to say thank you so much for joining us. Is there any last question or anything, Kevin, have you got for D at all?
I tell you what, I just wanted to make certain that we got in a plug for D being not only in Virginia, but across the country. So I just encourage everybody, if you have an opportunity to catch D live, take some time and look at some of his live performances on YouTube. That will get you to a show. Don't miss that show.
Okay, and D, is there any plans of you coming to good old Blighty, UK, and coming out and let us see you over here?
I would love to. I just need a connection. I would love to get out to, over there. Actually, I've been trying to get over there for like the last 5 years, so it's going to happen. Don't know when, don't know how, but everything does come full circle. So
Well, I was going to say, don't know who, don't know when. I think that could be a song. But listen, whenever you get those dates and you find anything that and you're coming up to Ronnie Scott's or to the Pizza Express in Soho, whatever, please let me know because like Kevin does the great, the Smooth Jazz Train out of Richmond, Virginia, I do the Jazz Moods on a Wednesday night out of the UK, and just let us know and I'd be more than happy to promote your show and let everybody know you're coming to the UK shores.
Truly appreciate it. And I want to say thank you to both of you guys because it's very important for us artists to really get that kind of support and platform that you guys provide for us. So the appreciation is great and it does not go unnoticed. Thank you so much, guys.
Not at all. Say goodnight, Kevin.
Good night, Kevin.
And it's good night from me. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Jazz Across the Pond. We'll be back again next week for another great interview. Meanwhile, we're going to finish off with a wonderful, wonderful track from the album this time is now. It's called Love Saw It. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been watching the wonderful D. Lucas. Take care. Look after yourself. Bye-bye.
You brought me so much joy. Love saw it. Love saw it. Love saw the hopes of a girl and a boy. a girl and a boy. Love saw a change in my heart. You brought me so much joy. Love saw it. Love saw the hopes of a girl and a boy. You bring me joy, me joy, me joy.